Hey guys, so today I'm going to reveal to you an experiment that I recently conducted, as well as the results of the experiment. I'm not going to get into details about the extensive background because it's part of an ongoing debate that's been going on for a very long time now. But if you want to get a little bit of background on what the hell the debate is all about, I'll put a link right down in the description below, and it should summarize the essence of what this is all about. But for now, let's get into the experiment. Okay guys, so this here's the experimental setup. We have the camera on one end. We have this object right here, which is going to act as the obstruction in the middle, or in other words, the bulge curve of the Earth horizon, obscuring anything in the distance. And this is the object that's going to be pushed back like a lighthouse in the distance or something, or a building, whatever you're trying to measure to see how much should be hidden behind the curvature. Okay, so before I start showing you the results of the first phase of the experiment and actually start breaking it down for you guys, I want to tell you what this experiment is trying to show. So basically the whole debate right now is, do the curvature calculators fail to account for perspective, and does it make a difference, and does it even matter? So the idea behind this experiment is pretty simple. First, I'm going to capture video from the perspective of the camera. I'm going to capture the video, and then from the perspective of the camera, it's going to be slightly lower than the bulge that rises up and obscures the bottle in the distance. This thing obstructs it like that. And I have the ruler on the bottle so I can know the exact position. And what I'm going to do then is, once I know the exact cutoff point from the perspective of the camera with this obstruction, I'm going to compare that to this piece of string right here. This piece of string that I have attached to the center of the camera, right there at eye level. Right there at eye level, the exact eye level of the camera. And so basically what I'm going to do is, I'm going to stretch this string across here, and what I'm going to end up doing is, I'm going to drag this string from the exact line of sight of the viewer of the camera, position it right here so it hits the obstruction, and then I'm going to see at what exact point on the ruler does the line of sight hit. So I'm going to compare the physical, direct, objective, absolute line of sight, which is what the curve calculators do. They consider the absolute, physical absolute. Let's say the lighthouse is 100 feet tall and the obstruction is 50 feet high, and then there's the person over there, or the camera over there. The curve calculators treat everything as its physical height, as the physical things that they are. They do not take into account perspective and angular reduction. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to compare the results of a piece of string stretched out so it's nice and straight at the very eye level center of the camera. I'm going to compare this direct line of sight wherever it hits right here, wherever the hell it hits on the ruler, and I'm going to go back and compare it to the perspective results. To what does the camera see? At what point, based on the camera's perspective, does this obstruction here cut off the shampoo bottle with the ruler on it, aka the lighthouse? At what point? And as far as I'm concerned, that seems to me like that will confirm whether or not there needs to be any difference between the curve calculators, which only account for the physical absolute reality of these objects, and the subjective phenomena of perspective and angular reduction. So this is a visual representation from the perspective of the camera filming it all. So watch closely, and let's walk you through this. So I move it back, I move it back, I move it back, and as you can see, you can kind of already tell that we lost a little bit of how much we can see of the bottle. Now I came back to the camera to focus. I haven't moved it all the way back yet. As you can see here, it is now only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It is now about 6 dashes below the 4 mark. Just a moment ago, it was 10 dashes below the 4 mark. Now it's only 6. So you can see less of the bottle. So I come back and I start to move it back again. Immediately we lose a little bit of our focus. It's now right up to the 4 mark, just about right there at the 4. So we went from 10 dashes, nearly half an inch below the 4 mark, and as the bottle moved away, we can see less and less of it, and it's now at the 4 mark, pretty close to the 4 mark. Okay, so now I'm going to take a piece of tape, tape it to the very dead center with a piece of string of the lens. Now, I'm going to take this piece of string and we're going to draw a straight line to the target, which is essentially what the Metabunk calculator does. Too high right now. Okay guys, so as you can see, it's a very precarious process of getting it right to touch, to nip the surface of the obstruction. And just about there, right there, nailed it. Perfect straight line to the ruler, and it landed at the 5.25 inch mark. So this is a pretty big deal, because what I just established is that there is a discrepancy between what the direct line of sight that I just pulled across with the string stretching it out. There's a discrepancy between the direct line of sight from the center point of the camera to the ruler. That direct line of sight hit the ruler at 5.25. However, as you guys may remember from just a few minutes ago, from the perspective view of the camera, looking at over the obstruction and looking at the bottle and the ruler, the cutoff point, the lowest point that the camera from the perspective view could see, the lowest point was right there, just about at the 4-inch mark. So from the perspective view, you can only see so much. But then when you do a direct line of sight, which essentially takes in the absolute values of the obstruction and the lighthouse, which is what the Metabunk calculator does, you get a different target. You get a different result. According to the straight line of sight with the string, the absolute value, the cutoff point should be at 5.25 on the ruler. This is what the Metabunk calculator would show you, but the perspective view, the cutoff point, was at the 4-inch mark. So there is a discrepancy here, guys. There's a discrepancy here. And this indicates that, yes, indeed, the Metabunk curve calculator and all the other curve calculators out there are making an error because they fail to take into account perspective. But now let's go a little bit further. Now that I have the string as a direct line of sight stretched out and it hit the 5.25 inch mark on the ruler, let me force the string down to where the perspective view had the cutoff point, which was at the 4-inch mark. At the 4-inch mark right now. This is what it looks like. So here's what's really interesting is that the discrepancy that I mentioned just a moment ago between the camera's perspective view and the absolute line of sight using the string, you can actually visually see that discrepancy in the string itself. So on the top part of your screen right now, you can see the string when it is directly straight, line of sight from the camera, and it lands at 5.25 inch mark on the ruler. And if you draw a straight line, you'll see that it's a pretty much perfect match. It's a straight line. But if you take a look at the bottom half of the screen right now, this is what the string looks like when the string is forced down to the 4-inch mark, which was the cutoff point as seen from the camera. And if you draw a straight line, you can see very clearly that the string is not a straight line. In fact, there's a very visible angle. In order to force it down to match the cutoff point of the camera's perspective, you have to break that direct line of sight. And to me, this is a visual representation in the line of sight itself, showing the discrepancy between the two modes of observing. In fact, if you look at the bottom part of the screen, it's kind of ironic. In order to make the string match the camera's perspective at the 4-inch mark, you almost have to make the string flat against the obstruction there in the center, that black obstruction. You have to make it flat right across it to get it to match. So who knows what that means. So I decided to go ahead and repeat the same experiment, but this time make the obstruction in the middle a little bit higher. So as you can see here, it's very, very high up, just about at the 5.5 inch mark, so higher than all the other ones, no doubt. Then when I got the string for the absolute line of sight measurement, the string was way above the ruler, past the cutoff point of the ruler, probably at what would be the 7-inch mark. So again, very high up. Again, I added more height to the obstruction, and we still got some discrepancy. So what does all of this mean? Well, I think first and foremost, one of the biggest implications of the experiments conducted here is that, yes, in fact, indeed, there is some type of discrepancy that exists in the curvature calculators that are being used out there. First of all, it's the discrepancy between what the camera's perspective sees as the cutoff point, cut off by the bulge or the obstruction, and what the absolute line of sight using the piece of string defines as the official cutoff point. There's a discrepancy there. The curvature calculators basically use a direct line of sight considering the physical world for its objective absolute properties. An object in the distance is a certain height, the obstruction in the middle is a certain height, and the person standing and observing things at a certain height, and there's a line of sight. And that line of sight is the physical reality. The problem is, that people see the world subjectively. And there's a phenomenon called perspective. It's how our eyes see things. If you hold your hand up to your face, it's going to block out a building, a 100-foot tall, 100-story tall building right in front of you could be obscured as long as you put your hand right in front of your face. That is essentially the principle at work here, because the bulge is closer to you, generally the midway point if we're talking about the curvature of the Earth. The bulge is closer to you than the object, such as a lighthouse, that you're staring at in the distance. So the curvature calculators do not take into account perspective. They only consider the absolute sizes. And when we pulled out the string and we determined the direct line of sight that you should be able to see, it was not consistent with what the camera's perspective was recording and seeing. The cutoff point was different. To me, that's a discrepancy, and I think that this experiment does need more. It needs to be done again and a few more times, and I think I'm going to do that. But that really is the key takeaway from here so far, that there does seem to be a discrepancy between the curvature calculators. Now, the second question, the second implication of this is, well, do the results benefit the Globers or the Flat Earthers, or neither of them? So that'll be another topic for another time. I will most probably do a follow-up video going into the implications deeper on whether or not the discrepancy in what in the perspective view from the camera, whether or not that sort of helps out Globers or helps out Flat Earthers, or one benefits or one doesn't from these implications. So I'll do that in a follow-up video. But again, for now, I want to say thank you guys for hanging in there. Thank you guys for watching. Holy crap, guys. Can you see that? The Earth is freaking cat. Check them out, guys. The brand new The Earth is Cat t-shirts are now available. They come in a variety of shirts and colors. I also got some great mugs available. Sweater hoods. Get yourself one of these The Earth is Cat t-shirts. I'll put a link to them in the description below. Get one from yourself right now.